So as Patricia said, we're going to be talking a little bit about workplace conflict and handling conflict in the workplace. And so I'm sure like kind of regardless of the work situation, who we're working with, the type of job we're doing, there's bound to be some sort of conflict that comes up in our day-to-day work life. It doesn't always necessarily have to be bad sort of conflict, but disagreements are known to happen. And so this is a presentation not only on how to handle like kind of poor workplace conflict, but also kind of like how to healthily handle workplace conflict. And so let me see if this will, there we go. Okay. So to kind of go over a little bit of the agenda here today of what we're going to be doing, and let me see if I can minimize this. Okay. And so we're going to be kind of talking a little bit about like what workplace conflict is. We're going to be talking about some of its causes, some of the consequences that can happen from unproductive workplace communication. And so we're going to be discussing some of the benefits of healthy communication when there's conflict. We're going to be exploring like the types of communication, both unhealthy and healthy versions. We'll be talking about some coping strategies to use to kind of help us better be able to work towards healthy communication during stressful moments. And then we're going to talk about compromise and how to use it in different situations. All right. So what is workplace conflict? So I'm sure many of you kind of have an idea of like what workplace conflict is. And so as I'm sure you guys probably know, generally it's any sort of conflict or disagreement between either two employees or several employees or an employee and a supervisor because of different beliefs, personalities, or kind of ways of doing things, right? And so there's many different causes of workplace conflict, but I think some of these are kind of the main ones that we'll typically see in the workplace. And so one of the first ones can be unclear communications and expectations of employees or supervisors or something like that. And so an example I can give you for this is like if you're working on a project with a team or a supervisor asks you to do something in particular, and there have been, they kind of give you a brief overview of what they're expecting. And you kind of get started on it based off of your own interpretation of kind of like what they're looking for. And then you kind of come to them afterwards with the finished product, and maybe the fellow employee is a little unhappy with it or the supervisor's unhappy with it because there was kind of a different expectation of what they were hoping for. However, for whatever reason, maybe one person didn't ask enough questions. If there was some confusion, maybe the other person didn't really kind of go into as much detail as was needed. But sometimes that can cause conflict, both healthy and unhealthy, like because that kind of stuff happens. And so one of the other causes can be differing opinions on how a task should be completed. And so like we're all our own unique individuals. We all were brought up in a different way, have different styles of working. And so I think this can be kind of a very common source of conflict sometimes. And this can be like even between two employees kind of working on a project together, like was mentioned before, one person could maybe be a little more structured and like to have kind of more frequent communication with the people on their team, kind of talking about, hey, what are we each doing? How's everybody doing? Does anybody need help? That kind of stuff. While somebody else may be more laid back and kind of wanting to kind of work at their own pace, maybe not have as much meetings. And that can kind of create a source of conflict as well between people that have kind of different opinions on how these things should be done. And so another common one that we can kind of see sometimes is discrimination based off of gender, race, sexual orientation, things like that. And this can be basically overt comments of racism or sexism or something like that, but they can also be something that's a little bit more under the radar, something that may not even be, some people may not even consider to be an insult, but there can be kind of a form of microaggression there. And so sometimes what I'll hear from people that I work with, or sometimes people even in my own personal life has been, they'll say like, hey, somebody had said, hey, you're speak very well for a Black person, or you're very pretty for a Hispanic woman. And to some people that may be considered a compliment, while somebody else may take that as kind of an insult or a microaggression and stuff like that. And so sometimes that can happen as well and can become a source of conflict in the workplace. And so the next one can be unhealthy office politics. And so this is basically like how we view like working together, how we view like how people get promotions and pay raises and stuff like that. And so if office politics are generally very competitive and it's like, okay, we got to be looking out for ourselves, and that's kind of promoted through all different structures, then sometimes that can lead to people not working together like we would like to see, but rather kind of looking more out for themselves and sometimes even not working along with people to kind of try to get ahead. And so these last two kind of work more hand in hand. So poor emotional regulation of employees or supervisors, or problems outside of the workplace that people bring with them. And so generally, if we were to have someone on our team that we're working with that maybe went through a death of a very close family member or is going through a very difficult move, and they come in maybe with not the best patience in the world, and somebody does something that upsets them that they would normally be able to handle. Maybe they snap at the person just because it's difficult to regulate some of those emotions. And so any questions on this so far? Anything like that you guys feel like you could add for like, hey, this could be also a cause in the workplace for workplace conflict?
Nina dropped a question. She asks, I would like to know how to approach giving information to individuals that may have issues with anxiety or if I am anxious at the time.
Yeah, of course. And that's a great question too. And that's actually something we're going to be getting into a little bit later into the presentation. But there are very specific ways of communicating with somebody to make it more of a comfortable and safe way of communicating, both for the person that's communicating some of their issues and for the person receiving that feedback. Okay. And so next, we're going to be talking about, okay, so what is healthy versus unhealthy conflict? And so I'm sure it can be kind of confusing sometimes to be like, hey, I'm not really sure if I'm communicating this in the best way. I'm not really sure kind of what to do in these situations. And so just to kind of briefly go over this part into a little more detail. So unhealthy conflict can involve anger, although anger can also be involved in healthy conflict. It's all about kind of how you portray that anger. But generally, with unhealthy conflict, that anger can involve, we're using like kind of blaming terms like you were doing this and this is unacceptable, or kind of using manipulation tools to when we're disagreeing with somebody to either kind of get our point across or to be able to kind of get our need met in that moment. And so on the other side of it, healthy conflict can be focusing rather on kind of pointing at the individual and kind of talking about something that them personally they're doing wrong. It's focusing on addressing the topic that's being disagreed upon. And typically it's doing so in a more of a respectful manner without insulting, demeaning, belittling the other person that's in the conflict. And so there can be two types of there can be kind of consequences of unhealthy conflict, of course. And actually, let me go back here and let me see if I can figure this out. So I'm curious, what do you guys think are some consequences of unhealthy conflict in the workplace?
Somebody said lack of trust, no
Mhm.
resolution, there's more conflict, resignations and no growth,
Mhm.
uh, no accountability, and avoidance of issues,
Yes. Yeah.
loss of respect, loss of motivation to do work.
Yeah, I think all those are great examples of kind of consequences of unhealthy conflict in the workplace. And I think some of them are even kind of some of the things that I said. And so there can be consequences for individuals, and then there can be consequences for the workplace as a whole too. And so some of the consequences we typically see for the workplace of unhealthy conflict in the workplace can be kind of workplace disruptions. And so this can be something along the lines of if there's a conflict going on in the work setting, either privately or with other people involved. This can cause people to be less productive because they can't really agree on what to do. And if voices are raised or the conversations being had among others, this can also cause people to get distracted that may not necessarily be in the a part of the argument, basically. And so in turn, kind of what I mentioned below, this can kind of lead to decreased productivity in the workplace, kind of falling behind on tasks, things of that nature, which can sometimes result in increased absences. And the absences can be for a variety of different reasons. So none of us really like to be in conflict. It's uncomfortable, it's frustrating. And if we're not feeling heard or supported, sometimes it can really negatively impact our mental health. And so that can lead to people sometimes falling into a depression, feeling burnt out, being really anxious to go into work and have those conversations. And so sometimes this can lead to a sort of avoidance, like was mentioned earlier by one of you guys, where people may kind of call in or take a day off or take several days off because of the fact that this is an environment where they don't feel comfortable in anymore. And it can even lead sometimes to people get physically ill. Like some of our mental health symptoms can sometimes manifest physical symptoms, like when we're really stressed out, people can end up getting sick more frequently. And so that can lead to increased absences. And if this sort of thing goes on for long enough, we'll typically see in jobs with unhealthy conflict or an unhealthy environment, we tend to see more increased turnover. So people leave more frequently, or people end up getting fired more frequently because there isn't a way of kind of communicating needs, and there isn't a way of everybody being able to hear each other and get the best working place we can. And so then
We
we have
had one question real quickly.
go ahead.
So Sean asked, if there are cultural differences, how can you make sure you're properly interpreting the situation, or how to understand other people's point of view?
Yeah, definitely. And I think part of this too is being able to take that active listening approach. And when we'll be getting into that a little bit later, we'll be talking about, okay, how can you use what we call reflective listening to be able to kind of make sure it's like, hey, am I getting what this person is saying? Like, is there something that I'm missing? And so we'll actually be getting into that very soon. And so any other questions before we keep moving forward?
I think that's it. We don't have anything else.
Awesome. And so in terms of like what are the different styles of unhealthy communication, there's two main ones. There's passive communication and there's aggressive communication. And so with passive communication, it's kind of more about what one of you guys had said earlier about like people avoiding talking about the problem. And so typically this is the other people kind of fearing upsetting the other person or fearing kind of further conflict in the workplace by bringing it up. That tends to be a little more negative. And so a lot of the time, the person avoiding the conflict is placing another person's wants, needs, or feelings ahead of their own. And so a common example that I would give for this one, and I have a little bit of it down here, is we're going to use Greg as one of the employees. And Greg is a supervisor in his company, and he struggles to provide feedback to his employees. And so the reason kind of Greg's feeling this way is he doesn't want to create an uncomfortable working environment. He doesn't want his employees to be upset with him. He wants to make this as comfortable as possible. And so even when he sees that some employees are struggling or some employees are doing something that may not be correct, he hesitates to go in and speak with them about it. Or when he does speak with them about it, he may beat around the bush a little bit because he doesn't kind of want to rock the boat. And that's kind of an example of what passive communication can look like. And then we have on the other side of the spectrum, we have what's called aggressive communication. And so aggressive communication is speaking your mind about something, but it's typically done not in the healthiest of fashion. It's typically done through the use of criticism or humiliation, or even like insults to get your needs met. And the example I have here is talking about Don. So Don insults a colleague who makes a mistake on a project. And so kind of using the example we had earlier, we're talking about like, let's say one person is a little more structured and a little more kind of like on the ball with things, and the other person may be a little more relaxed and gets things done at a later time. And so if that were the situation for Don, Don may be getting frustrated and worried. And as a result, maybe he takes out that worry and that frustration on the employee by calling them lazy or calling them like saying something else that may not be too productive on that one. And so that would be kind of some of the examples of what passive communication are and what aggressive communication is. And so then we have healthy communication. And so I know this was something you guys were asking about a little bit earlier. And so healthy communication is what we call assertive communication. And so assertive communication is places an emphasis on both kind of standing up for ourselves and listening respectfully to the other person or persons involved in the conversation. And so the goal here is generally to work towards compromise where everybody feels supported, everybody feels heard, and even if we don't always get exactly what we're looking for, we have come out of this with a better understanding of what the other person is trying to accomplish here. And so the example I have here is basically talking about like how this can be done. And we'll be going into this a little bit further in the future of the presentation. But so Natalie pulls Brett aside to discuss why he's falling behind on his paperwork. And so Natalie is supervisor of Brett. She's noticing, hey, like he hasn't been hitting his deadlines like he should. And so Natalie kind of calls him in, sits him down and says, hey, Brett, so I'm noticing you're falling a little behind on things and I'm a little concerned and I wanted to kind of see what was going on if there's anything I can do to help. And so what would you guys say is kind of the difference between the way Natalie handled this situation versus the way maybe Greg or Don approached the situation in our prior example for unhealthy communication?
So Jenny says exercising curiosity versus making assumptions.
Mhm. Yeah.
Gail says one-on-one and helpful.
Mhm.
Sarah says she's not assuming all is well, but also getting her point across.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly right. And I think the one-on-one thing can be crucial sometimes, because I know in team meetings, sometimes there can be the urge to kind of talk about it in that moment. But I think sometimes a more one-on-one approach can be better, just because the other person feels less on the defensive, less put on the spot, and they feel like they have the privacy to be able to really kind of open up about this kind of stuff. All right. And so kind of talking about, okay, so this is kind of how to use this. And so as I mentioned earlier, there's two different parts of assertive communication. There's I statements. And so I statements are kind of our way of addressing how we're feeling in the moment and either why we're feeling the way we're feeling or kind of what we need based off of that feeling. And so it's typically using, excuse me, what we call an I feel statement. I feel blank because of blank, or I feel this way and I need this. And so the example could be for Brett, if he were to be responding to Natalie in that moment, I'm feeling very overwhelmed with the number of responsibilities I have on my plate. And I would really appreciate more help from you on you or someone else on some of these assignments in the future. And so that's I statements. And then we have reflective listening, which is the other piece of it. And I think this can be a really good piece with making sure we're being culturally sensitive. This can be a really good piece in making sure that we really kind of understand what the other person is saying. Because I think understanding is a big thing in being able to make sure we're communicating effectively. And so basically, there's three forms of reflective listening. There's reflecting content, there's reflecting emotion, and then there's reflecting meaning. And so reflecting content can be something along the lines of this example that I gave earlier, where Natalie could respond to what Brett had said by saying, hey, it sounds like you're having a really difficult time keeping up with everything, and you would really like some more help in this way. And so that's basically not really getting into too much of the emotions, but it is kind of seeing like, hey, this is what I'm interpreting from what you're saying. And then we have reflecting emotion, which is more going into how Brett is feeling in that moment. So instead of just saying you're going through a difficult time, maybe saying it sounds like you're feeling very anxious and about falling behind, and it's making it very difficult to focus, and it's making it very difficult to catch up. And so it's really kind of placing an emphasis more on what the person is feeling in that moment rather than more the content of the situation. And so I think meaning is can be one of the most important of the three, but it can also be one of the more challenging parts to hit. Because what we're doing when we're reflecting meaning is we're kind of looking underneath the content and the emotion to kind of figure out like, hey, like what's the fear under here in this situation, or what are they really trying to say to me? And so with this situation, it can be something along the lines of like, if Brett's having trouble keeping up, Natalie could potentially interpret it as, it sounds like you're worried that if you don't end up being able to catch up, you're worried that you're going to get reprimanded, or you're worried you're going to lose your job, or something like that. And that's kind of really making you feel stressed out. And so that would be an example of reflecting meaning in that moment. And any questions on that particular piece, comments, anything like that?
Not seeing anything come through yet.
Alrighty, so we will keep going. And so I have a little bit of some video examples here for you guys on like how this works. This first one's going to be talking about I statements. It's two students kind of talking about a project, and kind of they're going to start off with a you statement on like kind of more of like a blaming statement, and then they'll switch over into more of an I statement format.
What the heck are you doing? Excuse me? You haven't done anything on this project. I've been working my butt off on this. So the problem is that if you don't do anything, you're gonna cause both of us to fail. I'm gonna cause. Yes, you are gonna cause. You're gonna cause us to fail because I've been working my butt off. You haven't done anything. Whatever, man. What am I gonna do now?
Okay, and so what we're seeing here with the use statement is both people are getting immediately defensive. And the reason why that came in was the original student kind of came in very hot, blaming, pointing, like very aggressive body language, kind of pointing at him and kind of making him immediately feel on the defensive. And so that would be kind of a use statement format and kind of not the best way of communicating stress or worry about a particular topic. And so then the next part's going to be kind of how they change this up to use I statements.
Hey Darren, how's it going? Hey bud, you doing all right? How are you? Want to sit? Yeah, go for it. Hey, we've been doing this project for a while, and I've been really working pretty hard on it, and I've been having a little bit of trouble because it doesn't seem like we're really working together all that much on it.
No, I definitely feel you, and I just totally remember that deadline's this Friday.
It is, and I mean, the thing is that I think we really got to figure out some time and work together and get this project done, or else we're not going to do all that well.
I agree with you, and my part has definitely not been up to par or as done as it should be, and it's my fault. I totally realize that.
Yeah, just no worries, man.
I mean, I've just been dealing with a lot of personal things. Literally, I just wanted to relax. I'll put this up. I'll get to work tonight. Okay.
Okay, and I've been working on this thing, so I kind of know what we're doing. So if you've got any questions, just let me know.
I'll definitely shoot you a text.
All right, cool.
Yep.
Have a good one, man.
See you, bud.
Alrighty, so we can see a totally different change in how the two of them are interacting together. And so for one, because one person in the conversation came in with more of a softer startup and really kind of just saying like what their concerns were, this allowed the other person not to be defensive, but it allowed them to kind of open up and share like, hey, this is the reason why I haven't been participating in the way that we would probably expect, and I'm going to try to do a better job of kind of helping out in the future. And so this kind of led to a more reasonable compromise for both parties involved. And so the next part's going to be a reflective listening video here. And this is going to be from Everybody Loves Raymond. It's going to be a little different. It's going to be more like kind of parenting based reflective listening, but it kind of gets across like all the main points of like how we use active listening in those moments. Okay.
Why did you do this, Allie? This is terrible.
Oh, great.
This is Michael's giraffe. He's crying now. Why did you do this? Cause is not an answer.
Active listening.
Ray, that doesn't work.
It works. I just use it on the worst kids in the neighborhood.
Would you? Look at this. Look what she
Just
did.
try it. Try it.
No, Ray.
I'll leave. What am I going to do? I'll do it.
Okay. Allie, let's talk about what you did.
I don't want to talk.
Are you feeling angry?
Reflect back.
You're angry.
Yes.
Okay. But it's not okay to rip up toys when we're angry.
I'm judgmental.
You are angry because
Because it used to be your toy.
Yes.
I see. I see. You think that mommy and daddy pay too much attention to Michael and Jeffrey.
Okay, I was handling this.
They get everything.
Right. And you're upset because we gave them your old giraffe.
I still like it.
But you weren't playing with it.
But that doesn't matter though, because it was still yours. And you're mad because we gave it to Michael without asking you, right?
Right.
Well, mommy and daddy made a mistake, and everybody makes mistakes, right, mommy?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
You feel better now, Allie?
Yes. Can I have the giraffe?
Well, it's broken, honey.
I know. I want to try to fix it for Michael.
Okay. And so this is kind of a good example of like how this works, even with young kids. So like if reflective listening is used, people are going to be feeling more heard and more like, hey, they're kind of respecting and listening to what I'm saying. And so there is more of a likelihood for the other person not to feel defensive, but to be more willing to kind of work with you and to kind of figure out, hey, how can we come to a compromise on this situation, even if we don't necessarily agree? And any further questions on active listening or I statements?
Don't see anything coming through.
Awesome. And so now I'm sure some of the questions can be, okay, how to know when to communicate. And so I know sometimes when we're in a disagreement, we can be feeling very emotional or we can be feeling very anxious. And sometimes we may not even necessarily think of like, okay, I should probably use I statements in this moment, or I should probably reflect back because we are feeling very overwhelmed or very flooded in that moment. And so part of how we know when the best time to communicate can be is to be able to kind of pay attention to our body and our mind, because our body kind of gives us certain warning signs to kind of be able to tell, hey, am I in a position to be able to communicate, or do I need to walk away or find a way to talk about this later? And these warning signs can look a little different for everybody, but I think some of the more common things that we see are we'll see muscle tension, we'll see kind of our heart's going to be pounding, our body temperature is going to increase. Sometimes our face feels flushed or we feel very hot. And sometimes if those symptoms get severe enough, we can feel kind of unable to have these sorts of conversations. And so it's kind of important to listen to those feelings in that moment. And if that is the case, kind of being able to call a timeout. And that can even look like saying to a fellow employee, like, hey, I want to talk about this with you. I think this is important. However, I don't feel like I'm in the space to be able to address this right now. And so how about we talk about this later today when I've had some time to think it over and really kind of get back to you on that. And of course, we don't always have this possibility if we're on a deadline or something along those lines, but I think it can be really important to communicate like, hey, like I am feeling a little overwhelmed right now, and I'm not sure how effective I'll be in this conversation. And so in that moment, if we are feeling very overwhelmed, and if we do end up being able to take that break, there's some tools we can use to kind of really process those emotions, to level them out, and to kind of get ourselves into more of a proper headspace. And everybody has their own different relaxation tools and things of that nature, but there are a few I like to use in therapy with some of my clients that I find to be very helpful. And so I kind of want to briefly go over them with you guys in here. And so the first one I like to use is called deep breathing strategies. And it's one of the more common ones that we hear from a lot of people. Hey, if you're angry, if you're anxious, just take a deep breath, that kind of stuff. But this is a little different, I would say. So the purpose behind this form of deep breathing is when we're really stressed out, when we're really angry, everything is going really fast for us, right? So like our heart's pounding, our breathing's becoming more shallow. We're feeling like we have a lot of energy and just need to get up and move and pace. And our thoughts are racing. And so it's like all about kind of helping to slow everything down for us, get us more into that calm state. And it's by kind of breathing in for 4 seconds, holding our breath for 5 seconds, and breathing out for 6. And I think that hold is really essential too for this particular technique. Because a lot of the times we can be tempted to, if we're just breathing in and out, we'll kind of go naturally faster and faster if we're stressed. And that could cause us to hyperventilate, right? And so that'll kind of defeat the purpose of what we're trying to do. And so with the deep breathing strategies, the whole goal is to be able to slow everything down. So if our body's more physically relaxed, then we're naturally going to be more mentally relaxed. And so that's deep breathing. And then with progressive muscle relaxation, the goal here is to release physical tension in our body as a way of being able to help with stress or anxiety. And so this can be done by clenching and unclenching muscles in our body from our head to our toes as a way of kind of getting rid of that physical tension. Because a lot of the times when we are feeling very stressed out, we feel that physical tension in our body. And I know people can sometimes have specific places they feel it. So like for me, I tend to feel it in my shoulders, I'll feel it in my neck. And some people can feel it in their back or even in their hands. And so by being able to like kind of forcibly clench and unclench some of these muscles, it kind of releases some of that built up tension. And when we're physically relaxed, like I said, with the deep breathing, it mentally relaxes us as well. And so then the final one, and this is one of my personal favorites that I actually use in my own life, it's the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. And so this technique is all about kind of regrounding us in the present moment, taking us out of our head for a moment to kind of give ourselves a little bit of a break from whatever's going on. And this can be done through using our senses. So like noticing 5 things we can see, 4 things we can touch, 3 things we can hear, 2 things we can smell, and 1 thing we can taste. And basically that's all about just kind of really being able to give ourselves some of that time to kind of get back into the present moment and unwind a little bit. And so that's some of the tools. Of course, there are more as well that some people use, and there can actually even be even more that people learn in therapy. And so any questions on some of these tools or any comments?
Jada says she loved the grounding technique.
Oh yeah, no, the grounding technique is one of my personal favorites. It's great.
I also posted on the chat a link to our guided meditation sessions. Those are like 10-minute sessions that you can always try.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome as well. I think those are really useful.
Any
Alright.
other questions or comments? I just want to make sure I'm not
Yeah.
interrupting people who are typing. No? Okay, go ahead.
Alrighty, awesome. So, what if these techniques don't work? I've heard that in some of my sessions before. I've like when I first started using some of these tools, I even thought about that. It's like, hey, what if the other person isn't involved? Because we can be doing everything right. We can be kind of using our communication methods effectively. We could be making sure we're in the proper headspace to communicate this stuff. However, maybe the other person just kind of isn't willing to kind of play ball. They're not really willing to communicate with us in that way, and maybe the unhealthy communication continues. And so there can be kind of a few different methods on how we can go about exploring solutions from here. And the first thing we typically like to encourage is talking with a supervisor. And if the conflict is employee-employee, it can be talking to your immediate supervisor to say, hey, listen, I'm having this particular problem. I tried to approach it with this person. We haven't been able to come to a compromise, and I'm still feeling like we're having a lot of difficulty with this. And I'd really appreciate some help with being able to kind of mediate what's going on here. And so that would be kind of the immediate solution, right? And if the problem is more with a supervisor, it can be kind of taking that next step and seeing like, hey, maybe I can talk to the person above to see if we can kind of find some mediation there. And so that can be one option. And so let's say this doesn't work. And for whatever reason, maybe there's been some attempts by your supervisor to be able to work things out, and you guys haven't been able to get everybody on the same page, and things are still becoming stressful and not productive. In that point, there's a few different places you can go. Like for starters, you can always reach out to us here at the Employee Assistance Program. We'll generally see people sometimes on like how to effectively navigate these conflicts, how to maybe like use some more tools at hand to really be able to figure out, hey, how can I make an effective compromise and make this a healthier work environment? Then there's the option of going to talk with employee relations. And I know we have our link here to talk to them, and they have a mediator that they'll typically use sometimes to kind of help people manage these sorts of conflicts. And that mediation is voluntary. So of course, both people would need to be willing to be able to agree to come do this mediation in order for this to work. And so talking to employee relations can be another way. And then lastly, we have reaching out to the Office of the University Ombuds. And so they're another way of being able to mediate these conflicts. They're a third-party organization that is removed from UF if there is a little bit of anxiety or nervousness around kind of going through the UF system to do this sort of thing. So the ombuds are another resource for you guys if you feel more comfortable that way. And so, yeah, any questions on those resources or anything else from this presentation?
What do you recommend when you have a disconnect between staff working from home and staff working in office?
Yeah, and so basically with the staff working from home and the staff working in the office, I can kind of see where there may be a little bit of confusion. Communication's a little more difficult in that way. And so I think depending on what the issue is there, it can be important to really figure out, okay, so where is this disconnect? Like kind of how have we tried to address it before? And is there a way that maybe we can provide a little more information or like follow up clarifying questions to figure out like, hey, where is the proper issue here? And does that kind of like answer the question? Is there something a little more that you wanted me to go into about that?
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about the UF Ombudsman?
Yeah, of course. And so basically, with the ombuds, how it'll work is like when you click on the link, it'll kind of bring you to the main page for the ombuds here, where it would kind of talk a little bit about like what they do, what the organization is that they're a part of. And then towards that, on that page, there will also be the option to fill out a form kind of talking about like, okay, what is the issue I'm struggling with? What are some of the services that I'm looking for? And it'll ask for some information on like, hey, when would be the more appropriate time to kind of meet and follow up and kind of get a little more details on the subject.
Is the Ombuds a free resource?
Yes, so they are a free resource for UF employees, and all you would have to do is kind of fill out that form and they'd be able to assist you in the mediation process.
Does the EAP ever come into the departments and do personality testing to share?
So we don't necessarily do personality tests or for individuals, so that would be something that more of clinical psychologists, which we do have a clinical psychologist here, that certain clinical psychologists will do the personality tests. However, we do come into different departments at the department's request to do different forms of educational presentations. We sometimes do grief counseling in the case of if there was somebody in the department that passed away suddenly, or if like there is like kind of some desire for like learning a little more about mental health crisis. And so generally, in order to request that, we have a link on our EAP website where you would go and click on the link and kind of fill out like details on like what you're looking for and good contact information for you, so we can follow up with you and be able to kind of get a little bit of an idea and set up some times to be able to visit.
Just to add, the training and organizational development office here at HR, they do offer DISC assessments. So DISC. So you can reach out to that department for those specific assessments. Do you have resources on communicating with teams experiencing neurodiversity?
Yes, so what I can do is I can place that in the comments at the end of today's meeting. And if anybody would like anything personally sent to them, I do have my email here listed, and I can kind of send you some of those forms that way as well.
We also have a neurodiversity in the workplace training that is offered through TNOD. I'm gonna see if I can find a link for that one for you guys. But that's also a good training to take, you know, if you have that in your workplace. Any other questions? Neurodiversity.
And I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to unmute because I know everybody's been communicating in the chat. But
No,
I
go
just
ahead,
wanted
Jenny.
I just wanted to mention about a series of 3 different neurodiversity workshops were released just this morning on all different types. Let me see if I can grab that information and put that in the chat too.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, we can include that as a resource when we send out the follow-up email for this. Okay. Thank you, Aurora. There we go. Anything else? Let me see. Any other questions coming through? Okay, I am not seeing anything else come through. Devin, anything from your part that you might want to add?
I don't think so. I think that about sums it up pretty nicely. Well, thank you guys for joining for this topic. And if you have any further questions, you're welcome to reach out to me personally, or you can kind of go to our EAP page and schedule if you're more looking for kind of individual counseling or presentations for your department.
Okay, Perfect. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. And again, this is being recorded, so we will be sending out the recording and PowerPoint and all that other information to you all. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
See ya.